March 1944. The skies over northern France were cold and gray. German reconnaissance flights reported nothing unusual, just the familiar hum of Allied bombers in the distance. Yet on one overcast afternoon, a Luftwaffe observation post near the coast of Normandy reported an aircraft unlike any ever seen before. The plane moved silently, fast, and with a precision that defied conventional design. At first, the observers thought it was a trick of light or weather, but the repeated sightings left no doubt the Allies had flown a machine that Germany did not recognize. When a routine night interception squadron was scrambled to investigate, pilots reported a sleek aircraft with smooth, almost futuristic lines. Unlike any known Allied or German plane, its wings were sharply swept, its fuselage low and streamlined. It moved too quickly for standard fighters, and its maneuvers suggested an aerodynamic sophistication that German engineers had not anticipated. Reports of its speed ranged from 600 to 700 kilometers per hour, far faster than the Messerschmitt Bf 109s or Focke-Wulf FW 190s stationed nearby. The Luftwaffe initially dismissed the sightings as exaggerations, but repeated engagements confirmed the aircraft's reality. By March 17, 1944, German intelligence compiled multiple reports and photos from reconnaissance aircraft. One image, grainy and partially obscured by clouds, clearly showed the silhouette of a twin-engine fighter with a low, sharply pointed nose and wings angled in a shape that German engineers called alien. The captured fragments would later suggest the aircraft was an experimental North American XP-82 twin Mustang prototype or a highly classified reconnaissance variant of the P-51 Mustang, though at the time, Germany had no knowledge of such developments. The engineers at Reschland and Brunswick were puzzled. The reports described speeds and altitudes that made the aircraft almost untouchable. It carried armament similar to familiar fighters, but had innovations in engine cooling, fuel efficiency, and structural integrity that were years ahead of German production capabilities. In Berlin, the Luftwaffe High Command convened an emergency briefing. General Adolf Galland, the inspector of fighters, presented the reports with visible tension. Pilots' testimonies indicated that the aircraft could appear over German positions almost at will, then vanish with impossible speed. Galland's voice, steady but grim, acknowledged what every officer feared but no one wanted to admit. The Allies had developed a new aircraft type that Germany had not even imagined. Engineers examined the intercepted photographs and sketches in top-secret facilities. They noted innovations in laminar flow wing design, an early adoption of pressurized fuel systems, and experimental propeller configurations that reduced drag. Compared to the Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulf series, the aircraft was far more efficient in both speed and range. Germany's jets and high-performance fighters, despite their engineering sophistication, could not match the combination of speed, maneuverability, and endurance exhibited by this unknown aircraft. On March 21st, a reconnaissance plan reported that the same aircraft had been observed conducting high-altitude reconnaissance over German-controlled Belgium. It carried cameras, and its altitude was so high that anti-aircraft units could not reach it. The flight patterns indicated intelligence-gathering missions, possibly mapping the coastline for future Allied operations. German intelligence officers recognized for the first time that their opponent was not only ahead in numbers, but also in the subtle art of aerial reconnaissance combined with advanced design. When pieces of a downed aircraft were eventually recovered near a small village in Normandy in April 1944, the Luftwaffe was finally confronted with tangible evidence. Its twin fuselages were damaged, but the engineering was immediately recognizable as something beyond anything the Germans had attempted. The engines, while using familiar Allison V1710 blocks, had been modified for extreme efficiency at high altitudes. The structural integrity of the fuselage, designed to reduce weight while increasing resilience, confounded German engineers. No blueprint or prototype in Germany resembled this combination of design choices. In May 1944, a report from Luftwaffe intelligence noted, "The aircraft operates beyond current technical expectations. Structural design, speed, and operational range are superior to any known German model. Attempts to predict performance using existing data have failed." There was no record of Germany attempting to replicate the aircraft. Resources were stretched, Allied bombing raids intensified, and the engineers assigned to examine the fragments realized that even with full knowledge, it would be nearly impossible to replicate the technology in time to affect the war. By early June 1944, Allied preparations for the invasion of Normandy intensified. The unknown aircraft continued its reconnaissance and fighter escort missions, providing critical intelligence that German forces could not counter effectively. Pilots reported the aircraft's ability to appear in multiple locations within hours, using speed and altitude in combination with advanced navigation techniques that were not yet documented in German manuals. Each encounter eroded confidence in the Luftwaffe's ability to control the skies. The most significant revelation came when Luftwaffe engineers managed to examine one of the partially recovered engines. While the power output matched that of familiar Allison V-1710 blocks, the modifications allowed the engine to sustain high-performance operation over extended periods without overheating. German prototypes attempting similar endurance failed catastrophically. It was not raw power that made the aircraft superior. It was intelligent adaptation and design optimization. By mid-June 1944, Germany's high command faced the inescapable truth. Allied aircraft production was not only greater in number, but superior in adaptability and efficiency. The unknown aircraft became a symbol within the Luftwaffe of the technological gap widening between Germany and the Allies. Engineers admitted privately that even if Germany could reverse engineer the aircraft, industrial shortages and logistical constraints made replication virtually impossible. The captured fragments confirmed what pilots had feared. The aircraft existed, it was operational, and it could not be matched by Germany's current designs. The pilots who encountered it spoke of an almost surreal experience. One Luftwaffe ace described seeing the plane glide across the horizon without sound, then accelerate to impossible speeds before disappearing over the clouds. Another officer recounted how attempts to engage the aircraft in dogfights resulted in futile chases, exhausting fuel and patience. German squadrons increasingly relied on defensive tactics, aware that the unknown aircraft represented a qualitative leap in aviation. By late July, intelligence reports began correlating the sightings with Allied strategic objectives. The aircraft had been used to map coastal defenses, observe troop movements, and occasionally escort bombers targeting industrial centers. Its effectiveness was measured not only in its speed and agility, but in the intelligence it delivered, information that the Germans could not intercept or counter. It was a weapon of both observation and fear. In post-war debriefings, German engineers admitted that the aircraft had forced them to reconsider fundamental aeronautical principles. Swept wings, fuel-efficient engines, laminar flow surfaces, and high-altitude reconnaissance were no longer theoretical concepts. They were already in operational use by the Allies. Germany had achieved technological breakthroughs in jets, but they were unable to match the versatility and precision of this seemingly fictional aircraft. The story of the aircraft Germany thought was fiction is not just a tale of technological surprise. It is a narrative of intelligence, timing, and the limits of industrial capacity. By the time the aircraft was recovered and studied, the war had shifted irreversibly. German engineers understood that brilliance alone could not sustain victory. Production, logistics, and operational integration mattered just as much. And in these areas, the Allies had overtaken them. By August 1944, as Allied forces moved inland following D-Day, the captured fragments were stored in secret Luftwaffe facilities. Engineers documented every piece, every design nuance, but resources were unavailable to attempt reconstruction. The aircraft had already left an indelible mark. It had demonstrated that technological surprise could decisively affect the battlefield, and that Germany's industrial limitations had placed a ceiling on what their scientists could achieve. Years later, Allied historians studying declassified Luftwaffe reports would marvel at the aircraft's design. It was indeed a prototype that pushed the boundaries of aerodynamics, engine efficiency, and operational range. German pilots, engineers, and officers all recalled it as something that had seemed impossible at the time, a machine that existed in reality but had appeared in their imaginations first. It was faster than any plane in service, more versatile than any fighter, and for Germany, it was a glimpse of a future they could not reach. The aircraft Germany thought was fiction had quietly changed the course of the air war. It was not a spectacular dogfight or heroic maneuver that decided the skies. It was a simple fact of engineering excellence executed by an opponent who had resources, strategy, and timing aligned perfectly. For the Luftwaffe, it was a lesson learned too late. Innovation alone cannot secure victory without the capacity to produce, deploy, and integrate that technology. By September 1944, the unknown aircraft had already cemented its reputation within German intelligence. Reports from frontline pilots described its near-ghostly presence, appearing suddenly above factories, escorting bombers, or vanishing into the horizon at speeds that left German fighters struggling to keep up. The Luftwaffe had no effective counter. MAD 262 jets were still experimental and limited in numbers, and conventional fighters were simply outmatched. The aircraft had become an almost mythical figure in German reports, a phantom machine that embodied everything their engineers had failed to anticipate. In Berlin, Hitler remained unaware of the aircraft's operational details, but top Luftwaffe commanders feared that the enemy had achieved what Germany could not: a reliable, high-performance aircraft produced with efficiency in mind. Reich Minister of Armaments Albert Speer would later note in his memoirs that reports of this aircraft caused anxiety not only among engineers, but within the high command, as it became a visible symbol of Germany's lagging industrial capacity. The fragments recovered from Normandy were meticulously analyzed at Rechlin. Engineers took careful measurements, recorded alloy compositions, and studied structural designs. The engine, though based on familiar Allison V1710 components, had been modified for high-altitude endurance. Propeller efficiency, cooling systems, and fuel delivery mechanisms were all superior to anything in Germany's current arsenal. It became painfully clear that even if the Reich had unlimited resources, replicating this design would require a fundamental rethink of aerodynamics, metallurgy, and production techniques. In October 1944, desperate to glean any actionable intelligence, German engineers attempted to construct scale models based on the photographs and fragments. Wind tunnel tests revealed remarkable aerodynamic stability, far beyond what German designs could achieve. Flight tests with partial replicas failed catastrophically. Engines overheated, wings warped, and structural failure occurred at speeds far below what the captured aircraft had demonstrated. Each failure reinforced the bitter truth: Germany's industrial limitations, material shortages, and time constraints made true replication impossible. Meanwhile, the Allies continued to expand production of advanced aircraft. By late 1944, over 4,000 P-51 Mustangs had been deployed in Europe alone, with additional numbers rolling off production lines in the United States. These aircraft not only performed long-range escort missions, but also engaged in reconnaissance, ground attack, and air superiority operations. Germany, in contrast, struggled to produce enough jet and piston engine fighters to replace losses. The captured aircraft had been a harbinger of this overwhelming numerical and technological advantage. Luftwaffe pilots who had attempted interception began recording their encounters in journals and reports. One veteran wrote, "We chased shadows that moved faster than thought itself. Engines roared in vain while the enemy disappeared with the wind. It was like fighting the future and losing." Another officer noted the psychological impact. The fear was not of being shot down, but of witnessing a technology that made everything we had obsolete. In Berlin, December 1944, as Allied forces prepared for the Ardennes offensive, German engineers continued their analysis. Material tests confirmed that the aircraft's lightweight structure had been optimized for both speed and durability. Control surfaces were designed to reduce drag while enhancing maneuverability at high altitudes. Fuel systems allowed operational ranges far beyond the Reich's capabilities. Every technical insight underscored a simple fact: the Allies had not merely caught up, they had leapfrogged Germany in operational aircraft design. By early 1945, as the war in Europe approached its final months, Germany faced repeated strategic failures in the air. The Luftwaffe was stretched thin,
pilots exhausted, and industrial centers under relentless bombardment. The unknown aircraft, once dismissed as fiction, had become a metaphor for Germany's overextension and miscalculation. Engineers admitted privately that their obsession with advanced jets, complex radar, and secret projects could not counter the Allies' combination of quantity, reliability, and practical engineering. Captured documents indicate that German scientists studied every detail of the aircraft: engine blueprints, wing curvature, fuselage construction, and instrument panels. Yet every attempt to reproduce the designs in Germany's limited wartime conditions failed. Resources were insufficient, skilled labor scarce, and production facilities heavily damaged by Allied bombing. The captured aircraft remained a silent testament to what Germany could not achieve, a reminder that innovation without infrastructure is futile. In March 1945, the aircraft's fragments were moved again for safekeeping as Allied troops approached northern Germany. Stored in a reinforced bunker, the remaining parts were cataloged but never flown. Engineers and technicians were reassigned to desperate repairs on Ma-262 jets as the Reich prepared for the final defense of the homeland. The unknown aircraft had never been duplicated, yet its lessons shaped the thinking of German engineers until the very end. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, Allied forces seized the remaining fragments. Intelligence officers documented every measurement, photograph, and observation. Some parts were sent to Britain for analysis, while others went to the United States under Operation Lusty, the Allied program to recover and study German and captured technology. Engineers marveled at the aircraft's ingenuity, confirming what German reports had suggested. It was a high-performance, multi-role aircraft designed with precision, efficiency, and long-range capability far beyond Germany's capacity to replicate. In post-war interviews, former Luftwaffe engineers reflected on the aircraft's impact. Dr. Karl-Heinz Müller, who had examined the fragments in 1944, said, "We realized then that the future had arrived and we had missed it. The aircraft was faster, more efficient, and more practical than anything we could build. We were chasing shadows." Another engineer, who had tried to replicate parts of the design, recalled, "Every calculation we made failed. Every model broke. It was a bitter lesson in reality versus theory." The captured aircraft story also highlighted a larger lesson about warfare. Germany's focus on complex, high-performance technology had been impressive on paper, but the Allies combined innovation with production, logistics, and operational strategy. The aircraft that Germany thought was fiction became symbolic of this imbalance, an emblem of the future in the hands of the prepared versus the brilliance wasted by the unready. By the late 1940s, the knowledge gained from the captured aircraft informed Allied jet development programs. Lessons in aerodynamics, fuel efficiency, and high-altitude performance were integrated into operational designs for the P-80 Shooting Star and later jet fighters. The war had ended, but the echoes of that mysterious aircraft continued to influence aviation for decades. In the final analysis, Germany's encounter with this aircraft was a turning point in understanding the importance of production, timing, and practical application of technology. It was not destroyed in spectacular combat, nor was it lost in a major battle. It existed quietly, observed and studied, teaching a profound lesson: brilliance without capacity is powerless, and the future of air warfare belonged to those who could combine innovation with execution. The aircraft Germany thought was fiction, once glimpsed over Normandy, left a mark far deeper than any bomb or dogfight. It was a glimpse of a world where speed, efficiency, and adaptability determined victory, and Germany's inability to grasp this reality had consequences that extended far beyond the skies. Even today, aviation historians reflect on that year, those sightings and those fragments, recognizing that the aircraft, so briefly seen and so little understood, embodied the turning point in air superiority during the Second World War. A plane that should not have existed, yet did, and in doing so, quietly rewrote the rules of aerial warfare.